Well, good evening, everybody. Let me first of all say that it is really an honor and a privilege to be here this evening to receive the Foreign Policy Association Medal. And I would like to thank Noel Lateef and members of the board most warmly for this award. And I would also like to thank Ambassador Bell for that wonderfully generous and profoundly informed introduction. It's very special for me to be the first university principal or president from outside the USA to receive the Foreign Policy Association Medal. But I do want to say that in recognizing me, you are primarily recognizing the significance internationally of the extraordinary university that I'm so proud to represent, the University of St. Andrews. One of my most distinguished predecessors as principal, Sir James Irvine, who served St. Andrews in that capacity for 32 years, I'm not intending to emulate that record, and about whom I shall say a little bit more anon, once described St. Andrews as the oldest, the smallest, and the most romantic of the Scottish universities. We are indeed, as you've heard, the oldest, indeed the third oldest university in the English-speaking world, founded in 1413. We're no longer quite the smallest in Scotland, but at nearly 9,000 students, we remain small by UK and global university standards, and we do remain so deliberately. Many of the people I've already spoken to here this evening have talked about cherished memories, both their own or those of their offspring, of the exquisite smallness of St. Andrews and the kind of smallness, the supportive nature of the environment that we have. And we cherish that. We're also, of course, primarily located in 1 square mile in northeast Fife. Now, anybody who's visited St. Andrews will know that it's unequivocally one of the most romantic places in the world. Its iconic skyline set against the North Sea with the unmistakable features of the 11th century St. Regulus Tower, the ruins of the cathedral, and the tower of St. Salvator's Chapel at the heart of the university stay in the memory of anybody who's seen that. And St. Andrews has, of course, many other memorable views, including those from the 18th tee on the Old Course up to the Royal and Ancient Golf Course Clubhouse. Views I'm sure many people here will know. And I have to say that as an honorary member, I'm pleased to say, myself of the Royal and Ancient Golf Club, I also particularly enjoy those views and indeed also enjoy the relationship which, under my principalship, the university is now very much building with the R&A. So St. Andrews is still the oldest, it's still one of the smallest, and it is the most romantic university in Scotland. But it is, as you've already heard, crucially, the most international university. Indeed, we are easily one of the most international universities in the United Kingdom. And that goes back a long way, in fact, to the very foundation of the university, on models which were based partly on those of Oxford and Cambridge, but actually more particularly on those of Paris and of Prague. And most of our original Scottish teaching faculty back at the start of the 15th century had been educated not at universities in England, but at universities in France or in the Low Countries. And that outward-looking orientation has defined us from the start, and it continues to do so. We are Scottish, we're British, and we are profoundly international. Our staff and our students come from nearly 140 countries across the world. Nearly half of our student body comes from out with the UK, and 1/3 of it comes from outside Europe. These are very striking and actually very unusual figures for a UK university. US students, of whom we currently have nearly 1,400, make up, as you've heard, 16% of our student body. Now, the University of St. Andrews, the USA, and indeed New York are bound together by very long-standing ties of affection and respect. In fact, They're so long-standing that they precede the very foundation of the United States of America. The signature of James Wilson, a St. Andrews student who, like so many young Scots, crossed the Atlantic in search of economic opportunity and who became a prominent constitutional lawyer, can be found on the Declaration of Independence in 1776. The great philanthropist Andrew Carnegie followed in Wilson's footsteps, emigrating with his family from Fife to Pennsylvania in 1848. And towards the end of his exceptional career, he was elected rector of the University of St. Andrews, a position which he held for 6 years. And as rector, Carnegie also funded a gymnasium, a sports field, an extension to the university library, demonstrating once again his enormous passion for education and the common good. And today at St. Andrews, we benefit from the support of the Carnegie Trust for the Universities of Scotland, and we enjoy an ongoing relationship with the Carnegie Corporation of New York, which generously funded the recent conversion of the town's Martyrs' Kirk, or church, into a research library for graduate students. And that library is now named the Richardson Research Library in honor of my immediate predecessor as principal, Professor Louise Richardson, now, as some of you will know, the Vice-Chancellor of Oxford. And there's much amusement, of course, that Louise went in one direction from St. Andrews to Oxford, and I went in the other direction from Oxford to St. Andrews. But I do like to say there was a global search involved in both cases. Now, I here pay tribute to the trail that Louise blazed in building on her earlier career at Harvard to deepen and extend St. Andrews' relationship with so many institutions and universities during her tenure as principal. Between Carnegie's rectorship and Louise Richardson's principalship, the bedrock of our relationship with North America was built by Principal Irvin, who, during the tenure of his principalship from 1921 to 1952, visited the US and Canada 18 times in less than 20 of those years, a really notable commitment at that period in our history. His journal records of his visits make really inspiring reading, including his friendship with the American philanthropist Edward Harkness, which led to major benefactions to St. Andrews and the foundation, of course, of the Harkness Fellowships. Now, that said, it would be a mistake, of course, to see our intense and vital engagement with the US as the extent of St. Andrews' international endeavor. We have research and teaching contacts and alumni across the world, and my role is to give strategic focus to our engagement with them. So to that end, for example, in the first few months of my principalship, I traveled to China and Hong Kong, where we have a growing alumni base and developing partnerships and contacts. And extending our footprint meaningfully in the Far East is a priority for us in the next few years. But that is unlikely, however, to take the form of establishing a campus in China, as indeed other UK and US universities have done. And I should say I'm very admiring of those who've undertaken those projects successfully. And indeed, on my way back from China last year, I stopped off in the United Arab Emirates, in part to visit NYU Abu Dhabi, part, of course, of the university now run by my former boss at Oxford and my very dear friend, Andrew Hamilton, the new president of NYU. And that's a very impressive operation, but it's not the St. Andrews way. We conceptualize global engagement differently at the student level. Firstly, we bring our students to a small, beautiful town in Fife that is self-contained but well-connected. We like to say we're 90 minutes drive from 90% of the population of Scotland. And they find they're part of a highly international community that constantly invites them to share, to compare, to develop, and to grow as individuals and as cohorts. And studying alongside peers from other countries enriches our students' experience of university. It adds an extra element to their education, a broadening of horizons, an appreciation of different cultures, and the beginnings of their own personal international networks. While they're with us, our international students contribute to the academic, social, and economic diversity of the university, and when they leave us, they fly the flag for St Andrews around the world. In addition to this, we also run extensive study abroad programs, enabling students to extend their academic skills and experience another culture. We currently have 60 study abroad partners, ranging from Doha and Hong Kong to Iceland and Melbourne. We also arrange for St Andrews students to visit us from across the world. And of course, I'm absolutely delighted that we brought Ambassador Bell in the 1980s, and we look forward to her revisiting our university in the future. So the crucial point to appreciate here is that we have so many study abroad opportunities that we give our international students a further international opportunity out with St Andrews during their time with us, enclosed all the time within the very special St Andrews experience. And we seek, of course, also to participate or to create international scholarly networks that are a good fit with our own commitment to excellence. We're also increasing our participation in networks of like-minded institutions. Ambassador Bell mentioned the European network. We've also recently joined the Tylors network, coordinated by Tufts University, which seeks to build global movements of universities committed to their social and civic roles alongside their academic ones. Again, in terms of our research, international collaboration sits at the heart of our approach to research. And the impact of our research is continually felt internationally. We have St Andrews researchers engaged with work in Syria, with Yemen, and other seemingly intractable conflicts, working to improve cancer detection and therapies, understanding the mother and child bond, fighting TB, designing new ways of detecting infection, helping people quit smoking, and to show that internationalism is greater than global, even explaining how to behave should anybody meet an extraterrestrial. The latter through the work of our recently formed Centre for Exoplanet Science. So you name it, we are focusing on it. And where appropriate, we also, of course, look to commercialize our research findings in order to help tackle global challenges. Our researchers, just to give you one example, are exploring mutually beneficial opportunities in Taiwan in the area of vaccine research against the virus that causes foot and mouth disease. So it's very striking that Taiwan lost 50% of its pig industry to foot and mouth, and it's still struggling to recover. We're at work there developing cheaper, effective vaccines that will support the Southeast Asian food industry. Now, lastly, what I want to say here is that many universities, of course, undertake this kind of translational work, and we should be proud that they do so and that they're challenging each other in the process. But in my closing remarks to you, I also want to speak to the different challenges that inform our present activity. British and Scottish institutions are undertaking all this kind of activity in a very politically charged and disruptive context. I'm not suggesting, by the way, of course, that the US political context is plain sailing. But notwithstanding that, Brexit, and I've just uttered a word that I expect some of you may have thought I was going to utter slightly earlier than I have done. Brexit is a reality, but the full nature of what that reality will mean for universities is as yet unclear, as the negotiations between the UK government and the European Union are still unfolding. Our greatest concerns are around future European research funding streams and around freedom of movement for staff and students. We also, of course, in Scotland have the added question of whether we will see a second referendum on the question of Scottish independence. But against both of those backdrops, our concerns are also cultural. It's crucial, it is absolutely crucial, that our universities are not seen as detached or inward-looking. So we prize the fact at St Andrews that amongst all the many league table features that I could cite to you, that we, a small university in Scotland, are ranked top in Scotland and 22nd in the world in the Times Higher Education World University rankings of the top 200 most outward-looking institutions. It might seem curious to cite being 22nd, but that for us is actually very, we think, impressive, and that we're really punching above our weight there. And we will and we must continue to build on that, and we're confident that we have the strength and that we have the character as an institution to do so. Under my principalship, we're creating an international strategy that has at its heart our core values of excellence and inclusivity, and which couples that with meaningful collaboration and dynamic partnership. Our university motto is the Homeric one, ever to excel, and we intend, if you will forgive the element of slight paradox, to do better what we already do best, to engage with the world, to educate its citizens, and to bring outstanding academic inquiry to bear on its challenges. So in that context, the acknowledgement and indeed the support of the Foreign Policy Association is so very valuable. So thank you again for awarding me and St Andrews the Foreign Policy Association Medal.